habitat is extremely important, both for ecosystem function and for most of the related aquatic life. Lots of things go on in that area, and there's a mention of the endangered species. Over 80% of the plants and animals that are on the endangered species list live all or part of their lives in this near shore area. So when we're talking about trying to make a special case for shoreland areas, I think we can see that these areas have some prime importance in terms of biodiversity, in terms of some of those charismatic species that we're all happy to have in our shoreland areas. And vegetative buffers are a good way to maintain those important functions in riparian areas. I really consider them a low-tech but high-performance solution for treating water in the approach that we've taken. And its buffer width is going to be very important in determining how effective that buffer is going to be in terms of its water quality improvement or water quality protection. If we take a look at lots of different studies, typically we find the same thing, that we're looking at somewhere about 50 feet or so tends to be extremely important to really start getting at the functions. The whole idea of having vegetative cover, especially high vegetative cover on the shoreline, is extremely important for keeping the water temperature low enough so it can have the high enough oxygen, and it could offer the protective areas and also the structure that's needed for lots of riparian-related species and also aquatic species. You start moving that overhead canopy, and what you're going to find is you're going to get increased water temperatures, decreases in oxygen, and on top of that, you're going to open that area up for typically invasive plants and things that grow in. I get lots of calls from camps that have been turned into mega mansions, and I get a call a couple years later and they want to know why these weeds are growing on this beach that they didn't have weeds there before, and they cut all the trees down, and what do they expect? You're opening up light, you're making the area very, very nice for these invasive species that just need a little bit more light to get in there and disturb the areas, especially when you're throwing sand around where they really like to get in there first and establish themselves. We generally recommend somewhere around a 100-foot buffer to get the majority of water quality function, and if you have the luxury, if it's a conservation easement or something else, for real good riparian wildlife function, we're really talking about a 150-foot buffer to really have true effectiveness. And we're talking about a forested buffer, vegetative buffer. We're talking about lots of different structure in there. This is a lot different in terms of the fact that we have lots of layers. We're allowing for transpiration, so the water is either getting thrown down back into the ground, it's getting transpired up into the vegetation. We have lots of layers for those raindrops to be broken up into much, much smaller drops to have less damage. We've got lots of, in a lot of the forest areas and the buffered areas, we're seeing a lot more water coming down the actual trunks and structure of the vegetation than we're seeing hitting the ground. So again, we're talking about a forested buffer, a mixed buffer. We're talking about lots of different types of structure to do this. This, on the other hand, isn't necessarily what we're really going for. If you have a situation like this where you just have the canopy, you're getting some shade function, but what we see from sites like this is a lot higher runoff, a lot less function. There really isn't a working duff layer. There isn't a lot of different vegetation that's really helping you with providing those water quality functions and the wildlife habitat that we're concerned about. And keeping things high is important because we get lots of complaints about things. The high shrubs and grasses that we can keep on the shorelands are effective in keeping geese and other waterfowl from really wrecking things. I'm just totally amazed at how many geese were on all the golf courses as we drove up here. It looks like there are more of them playing golf than anybody else. And the interesting thing is that they will not come up on a shoreline where they can't see over vegetation. They want to make sure they're not going to be predated upon. You don't have to put down all the fancy acids that keep them off. You don't have to put down these fish wires and things. What you really have to do is keep the vegetation high and they leave you alone. So let's quickly move into some of the 10 design principles that we've come up with, and we've mixed these around in terms of order. There's no real good order in that. We really want to protect and improve the soil quality. We want to include, as we discussed before, as many layers as possible. We want to use plants and all vegetation to spread and slow the flow, maximize the amount of vegetative buffers. We are asking about rethinking the size of lawns in relation to the intended uses, views, location, the location to shore and the needs of the buffer. There are a lot of situations where we've gone from completely forested areas to everything cut down, and we've actually measured tremendous increases in shallow water nutrients, and as a direct result of this, we really should think about a mix of turf and other types of vegetation to really offer a lot more wildlife habitat, both upland and riparian, and also a lot more function. Design for low inputs. We're really facing, in some situations, we're seeing a tremendous amount of increase of use of water, especially municipal water supplies, are being extremely taxed by the need to water so much. And I think we really need to really keep the idea that there are ways to there are different types of plants and plant material that we can use to allow for low inputs. And when choosing plant selection, we want to select the right plant for the right place for the right function. Design a very low maintenance landscape. Minimize all the areas of impermeable surface, and remember that all the actions directly affect the water body. Now, this whole conference has been put together so that we can interact with each other, and I've got some things I just would suggest that we might want to start the discussion with as we move into the separate sessions. First of all, do you agree with me that shorelands are a special case for gaining consensus for being extremely environmentally sensitive and the need to really consider ecological and water quality function? Are there other areas that we also might want to consider and put into that mix? Do you agree that we really need to balance low inputs and low maintenance with healthy vegetation, looking at natives, disease-resistant cultivars, alternative turf species, and the like? Should allowances be made, however, in situations where you can adequately buffer or even engineer fixes that can be incorporated? In other words, should allowances be made if you can initiate runoff controls so that you're not getting additional runoff, or the net result of the runoff is no more than what it was when before essentially the area was disturbed? It still might require higher inputs. Is it still justified to use higher inputs like municipal water supplies and things if you can do that? And do we all kind of embrace the idea that there's an importance of ecological function that we're missing depending upon what we select to do on the landscape? And in loss of that efficiency, we're affecting locally what's going on as well as globally what's going on. And most important, where are the holes and the gaps in the science that we have? You might not agree with everything I put up here today. There's new science coming out, better science coming out, that's really looking at what are these effects. And what I think we're going to work on tomorrow, if we ever do agree, can we sell it to the people that we need to sell it to? I think from the interest that we've seen in our landscaping, this new landscaping program, that we can. Most people want to do the right thing, they just want to know what to do. Most landscapers are excited about this because it gives them something more to do than just the typical maintenance that they've been doing. And so I think this will be an interesting 2 days to discuss some of these issues. Thank you.